Okay, everyone.
I
think we are
live
now. Let's have a look.
Okay, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Do let me know in the comments
or the chat if you
cannot.
This will be part of a recording and a bit of a live stream, just testing out a few of the new internet infrastructures here, finally, so we can actually start doing more of this sort of stuff more often. So I'm going to start off with this one, guys, in terms of topics. So we've got some information that we passed on earlier this week around Mount Gox. Okay, so this is related to Bitcoin, and of course Bitcoin is a very big influence in the market in terms of other assets movements as well. So it's very important that we always look at what Bitcoin's moves are in the short and long term, but also the external factors that can affect this as well. So this actually relates back to 2014 in relation to when there was a series of hackings back then, and essentially this Mt. Gox exchange has a significant amount of Bitcoin held in it. So all these Bitcoin holders that had used this exchange have literally been waiting pretty much around about 10 years to get their Bitcoin back. Now what's interesting is literally a few days ago, there was an announcement that came out that said that they were looking to start release of this, or certainly in the starting stages of releasing this back to owners of these Bitcoin this coming week, this Friday, i.e. tomorrow. But it looks like in the last day or two that information has changed in the sense that actually apparently they're going to try and delay this for another week or so. So actually they've given a deadline up until the April the 6th in relation to getting their affairs and orders basically to try and get this sorted. And there's no different stipulations as to how people can get that Bitcoin back, how long it might take. And I even read somewhere earlier that this could potentially be sort of paused, if you like, for Bitcoin users until around something like October, November later this year. So if people haven't waited enough, they are now having to wait even longer, which is absolutely crazy. But you know, what can you do? But this, it's absolutely mental. 141,686 Bitcoin is under its control. Absolutely phenomenal amounts of money. Of course, if Bitcoin does rise in that time, who knows what will happen? Of course, that valuation of Bitcoin in terms of its total value that it's holding, will significantly rise. But the reason I brought this to the attention the other day is exactly what I said just a minute ago, is that we have to always keep an eye on all these different strange things that are occurring or about to occur, because you can imagine that amount of money coming back into the market at whatever period of time that is, and the economy that we're in, the macro events that are going on around the world. A lot of people are probably waiting for this moment to be like, oh, maybe I can survive a bit longer in the real world, or what they wanted to do with the Bitcoin. Of course, many people might hold on to it and see what happens, but for me, this is slightly disappointing for those that have held Bitcoin through this old exchange to have to wait a bit longer. Very strange. But as I said, it's something that we really need to focus and keep an eye on, because we know Bitcoin does have a massive pattern towards the rest of the assets. We'll go into that in more detail in a second when we go into the charts, and by all means in the comments, guys. Oh, you have an echo. Interesting. I know why that's because 2 seconds. It's always a way. It's always something. Mute that. Okay, if you guys let me know if that's removed the echo or not, that would be greatly appreciated. If not, then I will throw this laptop out the window. Okay. Gotcha. I found.
Cool. I think, don't count on it, but I think we might have fixed it. So please let me know in the comments if that has been fixed or not in that situation. So apologies for that. Just make sure you guys can hear. So it's the first time we've... Cool. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. Looking out for each other. Love it. So apologies for the echo. At least you can hear me twice as much, I suppose. So yeah, just keep an eye on this because we're going to the charts in a minute. And I wanted to sort of be very clear. I think looking at most of them, since that sort of early January period when we're at one of the bottom areas and we had that massive rise, a lot of them are around about 50-60% on that drop now across that period of time. So this really heavily relates to my points about 90 days RSI indicators and things like that. So we'll touch on that in a second. But let's finish these topics off quick, guys, because some other crazy things. We have the Silvergate situation going on right now. So if FTX wasn't enough towards the latter stages of last year, another massive bank could potentially be on the brink of full collapse. Now, a bit of background with Silvergate was very interesting, of course. They specialize particularly in like stock markets and just general banking, but quite recently, I'm not sure how many years ago, they really shifted their momentum and thought process towards crypto. And I thought it was quite interesting that they pretty much took 100% of their focus into this area, which is really interesting. But of course, as many companies have done, especially even these supposed banking institutions, perhaps whether it's lack of experience in the space, they just maybe followed that big, massive, great travel that we've had over the last few years of the excitement of crypto, especially towards the end of 2021. You saw a lot of companies came about then and thought, oh, this is going to last forever. And then, of course, 2022 absolutely flopping like mad. And there's just no recovery. Why? Because most of these companies, most of these projects, and even now these banking institutions appear to have no strategy behind them whatsoever. So really heavily focusing your portfolio into full crypto is a bit crazy. Now, I'll admit for myself, a majority of my holdings in terms of finance and stocks, etc., are in crypto. For the reasons of it's the future, if not the beginning of now, right? So for me, this is something that's very strange to have seen that these guys went all in on that. But look at this. Silvergate reported a $1 billion loss for the fourth quarter of 2022 after investors raced to withdraw more than $8 billion in deposits. But I think it's absolutely crazy, to be honest, guys. When you think about that, I'm just going to grab my charger. It's another thing. This is the crazy thing, right? Because it's just the amount of money that is invested in these and the kind of users that we've got in the crypto space at the moment is totally legitimate reasons as to why this has happened. But what staggered me the most, particularly about this Silvergate information, it's been around for a long time, guys, by the way, and this is where it ventured into crypto in 2013, and they literally just plowed majority of their focus on this space. But what the really interesting thing for me was its affiliation with things like the Federal Reserve, who were essentially backers of this and regulators, if you like. So you see all this news quite recently about the situation with regulation and stability and sustainability of crypto projects, etc., and banking situations. FTX, a prime example. Everyone gets on their high horse about what should and shouldn't be happening and how things should be done, how things should be regulated. But then you've now got this kind of like situation here with Silvergate, where you've got the Federal Reserve who are supposed to be backing this, and they're the ones that dictate all this narrative over however long it's been to suggest all these things that the crypto space should be doing. So it's kind of a bit of a hypocritical moment, to be honest, in some aspects. But again, There was obviously a bit of suffering from users over this period of time. They've fortunately, in most cases, managed to withdraw their funds, unlike some of the other exchanges and companies like FTX, where people just lost all their money. But again, it's just another philosophy around the fact that we're still very early in this space. Guys, thanks for joining us, by the way. Keep those comments going, keep the likes going. Absolutely loving this. I'm going to try and do this at least once a week. Apologies. We tried to do this a while back and my internet was terrible. And it's difficult sometimes to just do videos on a daily basis at the moment with work and everything. So hopefully we can enjoy this a bit more and get some involvement with you guys out there. Would be absolutely phenomenal to join us in the future ones as well. But we're just going to plow through these little news snippets quick first, and then like I said, we'll jump in the chart, and if there's any that you want us to cover, let me know in the chat and we'll for sure cover those. But again, literally across the market right now, we're in a bit of a drop down over the last 24 hours, but I'm looking at the overall picture, looking back a bit, standing back a bit, and you can see some really interesting patterns where we're coming towards really critical support lines right now. So this part, this is very crucial as well in this whole kind of conversation. So this week were some kind of like closed-doored meetings going on with the Federal Reserve and also people like the central banks, the Federal Reserve, etc. of USA, and this of course does have a massive effect to the rest of the world. US is one of the biggest financial outcries out there. So the chairman of Federal Reserve, Jeremy Powell, has this meeting this week in relation to what he anticipates to be the next phase of the interest rate hikes. Of course, if there haven't been enough already, this is absolutely crazy. That chair looks uncomfortable. Oh, do you know what? Actually, I think it's because of the angle, the way I've had to position everything. It looks like I'm sat on some weird stool or something, but the chair is uncomfortable. I think I've actually got a pin sticking into my leg, but there you go. But yeah, this is interesting because I believe in next week or the week after, the official announcements, if you like, come out from these findings, from these thoughts of the chair Powell. Remember the last time this happened, about a month or so ago, there was a lot of hysteria around it as, is this going to be the crash? Is it going to be the big crash, the stock market crash everything was talking about? But it actually had a positive outcome. And it's really interesting. I was watching a few news reports, not necessarily news reports, but just some really key financial institutions covering this topic. In my long drives to work, I just like to listen into YouTube stuff all the time. And their big major conversation around this was the sort of thought process that the market does what the market wants to do. And literally in that instance is that the last announcements that came around for the interest rate hikes is that they took some snippets of real positivity out of it, albeit that in general the conversation is pretty negative because we are in the middle of a recession, right? And they took that and we saw the markets climb. And we'll go into the chart again, as I said, in a minute to showcase that. But this time round, we've got a few other things. We've got the employability rates, I think tomorrow coming out. The Mt. Gox situation has perhaps maybe calmed down a bit, but now we've got the Silvergate situation and loads of other things kicking off this week again. The usual nonsense and circus of the media that goes round and round in circles. But again, my point being is that you can watch all the YouTube videos you want about all the different projects and speculation and this, that and the other, like we do even on this channel sometimes. But the fact of the matter is you must always research everything, keep an eye on everything, or at least keep your ear to the ground. Keep an interest in some of the channels out there or interesting reports and articles that are talking about this kind of thing on a regular basis, because this has a massive intake to what happens to our crypto markets as time goes by. So we need to keep an eye on this. I'm anticipating at least the 0.25% rise again. I don't think it'll be as high as people were scared about earlier this year, but again, I think we're going to see incremental increases over the next few months continuously till we get to those crazy percentage numbers later on this year. Here in the UK, it's like probably everywhere else, it's absolutely crazy in terms of the interest rate hikes. We're now seeing that being portrayed in things like mortgage rates, loan rates. There's a massive amount of people now that are defaulting on loans and things like this, and the cost of things like financing cars is getting ridiculous. I saw an article earlier that someone in America had bought an old Ford Focus or something from like 20 odd years ago and is paying like £300 a month. That's just how crazy it is. That's in the US. I mean, here in the UK, it's balanced roughly right now, but I think as I said, mortgage rates and stuff are increasing. So we've just got to keep, as I said, keep the philosophy and thoughts on this. And again, we'll go back into the chart in a second, especially on Bitcoin, but this is now starting to race to a really interesting support level, not just on this Bitcoin news, but also across the market. It's really interesting to see this. And once you take that step back and you look at it and you go, wow, we are actually like been coming down for quite some time now. And it's not until you do that that you start seeing this pattern. So again, we'll talk about that shortly. And then finally, I just wanted to pinpoint this part as well. Of course, we always talk about CBDCs on this channel. I think it's very important, guys, to keep your focus on these aspects. So I'm very, very fortunate in a couple of weeks' time to be attending a very interesting Digital Pound Foundation event, which is going to have the likes of Swift and Quant, etc. there. We're learning about the geopolitical aspects of CBDC, so I'm going to be really excited to put my thoughts ahead to some really key influential people. But there's also an event, I think around April or May, that is a general public event as well. I thoroughly recommend just have a go look on their website or subscribe to their email at least, so that you get the information around those, because that one's an absolute open event. If you've ever wanted to try and meet the likes of Quant, Ripple, etc., they're all going to be there. I'm not kind of sure what the format about it is, but it's generally an open kind of big conversation, big event around CBDCs. So this is obviously the central bank digital currencies, the replacement, if you like, of our existing monetary system. Whether that's an immediate replacement over the next 2 years or something that's going to transition over time will remain to be seen. But CBDCs are obviously a fundamental part as to who's powering this, i.e. blockchain, but which chains, which companies. We know many of them already that are powering or looking to power the UK's version, the digital pound, for sure. But you can see here, Swift, obviously a massive, humongous company that is basically the infrastructure of finance for God knows how many decades, right? So during a 12-week testing period, Swift simulated nearly 5,000 transactions between 2 different blockchain networks. This is important to understand. Companies or projects like Quant are very heavily integrated with interoperability, because each country is going to have its own frameworks, its own chain choices, and it's very important that there are also systems out there that can coordinate these together. It's the only way you're going to get cross-border payments to work, certainly in the short term. So we've got to keep an eye on that. But yeah, 2 different blockchain networks and existing fiat payment systems. Over 18 financial institutions worldwide participated in the study, which is phenomenal, really. I think there's over something like 90 countries right now trialing CBDCs, which is absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to report that from the event at the Digital Pound Foundation in a couple of weeks' time. It's going to be brilliant. I'm looking forward to it. But this is not new. This has been going on for a few years now in loads of different aspects. So we've had things like Project Dunbar, which I think was kind of related around the Asian regions. We've had things like Project Helvetia, Project Jura. We've covered all these on the channel as and when they've kind of happened. More recently was Project Icebreaker. We'll talk about that one in a second, but it's really interesting because all the pockets of the world are coming together now in their CBDC trials and piloting. And yeah, for sure, it's something we kind of recognized maybe about a year or so ago, the RTGS system. So this is about the whole remittance service of the world, which is, I think, something like 720 billion pounds a day's worth gets transacted through the RTGS system. It's basically the whole world's finance framework. Will be replaced, or is now right now being replaced in fruition with the standardization of ISO 20022. Please bear in mind that ISO 222 is not about regulation as such. It's very much the standardization of financial messaging in the background. You can pretty much go on any of your bank websites, NatWest, Santander, Barclays, you name it, just simply type in your bank's name and that ISO 222. They've all got it on their websites now. They're even encouraging information through direct mail. I got one through the post the other day from my business accounts in relation to that, preparing us. So what does it mean? What's coming? So November 2025 was the date that was coming up in relation to the transition basically of the RTGS being replaced with this new blockchain system. Okay, so some really exciting stuff coming out there. This can be very interesting indeed. But as I said, it's something that we need to definitely keep an eye on as it goes by. And it's not, as I said, it's not something new. It's been various different projects, different pilots, but pretty much the whole world is getting involved in this right now. And on that point, 6th of March, so literally 3 days ago, Project Icebreaker was collaboration between the Bank of Israel, the Norges, I can't remember how that's pronounced. This is very much around, well, kind of like why they called it Icebreaker, really, because you're talking about like Norway, etc., and involved in this as well. But again, very heavily related to trialing the CBDC systems, and of course, very heavily pushed by the G20, the World Economic Forum, for example, and of course BIS, huge financial institution, which we're looking at right now. These guys are the ones that are pretty much building the frameworks and the piloting systems for all the different things that we talk about in the past, and like this one as well. So definitely have a read of the page. I'm about halfway through it. It's 42 pages, but it's really interesting. And if you do get time, read the other ones as well from all the other projects as well, because once you start learning all of that, you understand more about central bank digital currencies. Then you can start piecing together what companies are already integrated and looking towards, providing the solutions. We know Quant's heavily involved here. Digital Pound, as I mentioned, Ripple, of course, pretty much worldwide. You've got things like Stellar, Algorand, as an example. Avalanche, of course, Avalanche recently partnered that announcement with Quant, didn't they? So it's all coming together. Really exciting, for sure. Kingdom Sam, do I have a Discord group? I don't at the moment. I did have Telegram. I had to come off it because I was fed up with all the scams and the nonsense that was coming through. But yeah, if there's an interest in setting that up, yeah, for sure, I might look at doing that. It's just a bit of time consumption. But I think as we develop the channel and stuff even further, maybe getting towards that sort of 10,000 sub mark, it's definitely something I'll try and integrate and get some moderators in and stuff like that to help out as well. So yeah, thanks for that question. So yeah, those news bits out of the way, guys. Let's jump into a few like chart modules here, because as I said, I'm very interested to show you what's been going on, to be honest. And it's actually quite interesting to see that pretty much all of the assets that we kind of cover on the channel, and any that you want us to talk about, just chuck us a chat request in the live chat. But look at this, for example, with Algorand, right? So these fib retracement levels that we drew in before are ones, I think, I can't remember when I last did an Algorand video. I haven't moved this at all, but you can see the critical stages of support and resistance potential areas. And my point being about majority of the market right now, and I'm just going to pull up Bitcoin as a prime example. Look at this drop. It's absolutely significant right now. I'm just going to remove this previous price change. But again, we're sort of starting to knock on the door, guys, of these lower regions. Currently floating Bitcoin literally around was it 20,296. It's already had a low. Literally, look at that on top, 20,050. So it just about survived that and bounced back a bit. But my point being, and we drew this in ages ago, this is the critical area that I'm talking about. And as we saw this big jump up, this is a huge gap, guys. This is a huge gap. It's majorly overpurchased, as are many of the other assets out there as well. And for sure, we're seeing they come down of that. And it's literally broken through, to be honest, over the last, 48, 72 hours through three major fib level areas. And literally trying to touch back down on this 19,723. There's loads of talk this week about it going up to 30,000, or if it did hit those fib levels, it could go either way. And obviously right now we're looking at the bear side of this. So back to my point, Algorand is a prime example here. We're seeing similar patterns, but I wanted to make this clear as well of the drop down that we've had in the price from this marker here at the top around about 24th, 25th of February, all the way down here. This is relatively around 40% drop, so very close to the 50% mark from that top line. But if you look here in comparison, where we had these low areas at the end of December, we are not far off this, guys. So from DCAing opportunities, I haven't touched most of these assets over the last week or so. There's been a few that I've like DCA'd into, but right now with this drop down in such a quick period of time, it's something where I can't be like, I need some stability here. And the only way we're going to see that, really, in my opinion, is Algorand as an example, is to hit these fib levels and then try and get some stability across them. What I don't want to see is huge bounce backs up and down, because this is where the volatility kicks in and it just becomes majorly unstable. I knew when we were coming up that we would be hitting these kind of lower areas at some point, but perhaps not this quickly. And again, that's why I brought out the Bitcoin chart, is exactly the same principle. Literally back here, 20th of February, we're talking about it 2 weeks ago, guys, maybe 3 weeks ago, that we have literally broken these support areas already. And that's kind of understandable because of the way that we came up. You could probably expect a mirrored effect on the way down. So for me personally, I'm not even joking here. I do still have my buy orders back down to these lower regions around 15 cents. I'd love it to come in selfishly, but I would not be angry either getting these points, because it's always that mentality. It's difficult to sometimes get out of. But when you're on these upward channels, you're sort of sitting there going, I wish I got more when it was lower. But then I just have this patience game, the experience that I've had over the many years, and patience does deliver after all. It can sometimes take a bit longer than you think it could, but in this principal area is now something, if I see in the next sort of 24 hours or so this stabilizing at this current area of around sort of 19.2 cents, around that 20 cent mark, right? Then I can start maybe anticipating a bit more DCA and going in there and seeing if it does come back down to test these lower regions. There's no reason why it wouldn't do that, because in my opinion, for the longevity of all of these projects, I do want to see us maintain verification of the really low areas that we saw over these periods of time. So that's with Algorand, for example. But equally as important to understand that this could bounce back, but you might start seeing this kind of effect of like, we could get stability here, jump up to here, and it will usually do it in these patterns. I would argue that it's usually a longer term process, but that's kind of gone out the window, especially with the moves down and the moves up. This is a short period of time, guys. We're talking about like 2 weeks, which is crazy. If I just also quickly mention these down here from an RSI perspective, 26 on the 14-day, guys. For me personally, I'm usually DCAing on like 40 at a 14-day RSI. At least initial investment capital chuck-ins, but this has dropped significantly over a short period of time, and that 90 days coming towards the 40, so it's going to become really interesting over this next week or so, in my opinion, on that particular area. So let's keep an eye on that, guys. So guys, do also bear in mind to chuck your thoughts in the comments or the live chat for any tokens or projects you want us to cover. More than happy to do so. So yeah, that was Algorand. I'm just going to flip as well. Someone was asking about XTC in some of the comments earlier. Very interesting chart patterns here for XTC. This kind of thing doesn't usually happen unless there's a really low amount of volume coming in, but I don't think that's the case at all. But XTC, it's one of those things, people's like, has it actually even moved? It is one of those tokens. It's very early. It's a very early project, in my opinion. Something that I'm excited to hold for a long period of time and see the further developments of this great project. It's got a great team behind it and some excellent utility cases. And we know Zinfin, with the heavily relations to the likes of Quant, especially the integration of the R3 nodes and things like that as well. And lots of integrations with things like Hyperledger Fabric, some top level chains out there too. So for me, again, this is really one of the very few projects out there that has a chart or a move in the chart Sorry, who's mentioned here about Harry Kane. Honestly, let's not talk about Spurs. It's too raw. Kingdom Sam, yeah, I completely understand. Would be great, sure, to create a community. Yeah, do you know what? Yeah, as I said, I did have Telegram. It might even still be alive. I'm not sure. There's a few people I've got on my WhatsApp group that came from there that it was great building that community, but I just got fed up with all the scams and stuff. So I will add that back in, and then maybe add some Discord in there as well. But I really appreciate you guys, joining us, and also for the people that have been with us for the long term. Hopefully you always find it informative. As I said, apologies, the first live one I've done for a long time. I'm usually very tired, and I just thought there's loads of things to talk about, and the whole market's going down, and one last thing I want to do is like 100 videos of the same topic conversation of downward trends, blah blah blah. So we'll just try and cover as much as we can today, yeah. But yeah, thanks for joining, guys. It's awesome, and anyone that's watching the recording back as well. So yeah, XTC, playing around with this fib level here at 2.8 cents. Again, I'm not majorly fussed about the moves of XTC. If you're a short-term trader, probably absolutely you would be making some great opportunities, as I would say probably on a week or bi-weekly basis. But on the long-term aspect, I'm like, whether I'm buying at 2 cents or 3 cents, I'm not majorly fussed at this area. I'm just trying to accumulate as much as I can for the future. I'm not looking to sell XTC personally until minimum 2025 and beyond there, and stagger that out for sure. I think it's very early. It's not having the ecosystem just yet to be on that ripple level and for a mass adoption of this project, right? So we just got to be patient. As I said, I'm a long-term holder, so for me it's just about DCAing when I can. But one thing I will mention is when I see these kind of like continuous trend patterns in an upward or downward fashion, I tend to not jump in until I see some stability over a fib level line, not always on the dot, but around those areas for at least a few days, because the volatility for me is something where you can get emotional or too emotional with, and make some potential risks that you don't necessarily have to do if you just have a bit more patience and understand where we are and what it's doing. And also, as I said, what's the project doing in terms of its life cycle? Where is it in terms of its growth and everything like that? It's really important. So yeah, always keeping an eye on XTC for sure. So hopefully that's answered a few of the questions that someone mentioned to me in some of our groups earlier today. As I said, guys, do make sure you smash the like button, and also subscribe if you haven't done so already. And also, if you want us to cover anything, do drop it in the comments, the live chat section, please. Absolutely. In fact, oh dear, I just realised that wrong setting on there. So probably missed a few messages as well. Okay, guys, so I'm just going to go into a few others that we tend to cover quite a bit on the channel, and also ones that I hold myself. It's always good to talk about ones that I'm holding, I suppose, because you get a bit more, legitimacy, if you like. Quant, love Quant. Absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to meet their team in a couple of weeks. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. When I messaged the WhatsApp group that I've got earlier, it was around 107, so it's actually crept up slightly. With the last few days, it's quite amazing with Quant, really, because these moves are quite significant in terms of the actual value itself. So that dip down to 107 was very much matching back with these volatile points that we've seen across the board really over the last year or so. So really interesting to see that rejected quite quickly, and now we're looking to try and stabilize ourselves around this fib level of around the 113, 112 mark. So we have to keep an eye on that. Again, my point with the Bitcoin charts and all the others as well is that as we hit these points, we need to start seeing some stability over a few days' time, because otherwise all that's going to happen is it's just going to keep that bearish momentum coming down. I'm not angry with that, by the way. I've still got my purchase orders at $87, guys. I'm not going to be ambitious still. I think I've still got like a few at 44, which is very ambitious. But I did think that 87 was an applicable area. One, because of the data from history, and we've marked those out in several different videos. And also the point of the more recent fluctuations around these kind of areas, around $90. You can see this back here, November 2022 and around December/January coming into this year as well. And that move up, I did mention it at the time, like with most of the other charts, this in my opinion is too high, too quick. And usually what happens with that, the overpurchasing kicks in, people get bored, it hits its ceiling, and then you get that fluctuating pattern down. In some cases it comes down dramatically, in some cases it comes down over time. And that's why we always look at things like the RSIs. I'm referring to these, by the way, just circling around in case you didn't know what I'm talking about ever in the videos. These are the relative strength indexes. These give you a very good kind of overview, as well as looking at the chart and the fibs and everything like that. Gives you a good overview of segmented periods of time. If you were an investor, for example, on a 14-day, i.e. 2-week periods, or over a few months, or over a few weeks, it does give a bit of an extra kind of verification, if you like, an extra indicator, hence the word of RSI. The 14-day on a quant is at 24. Okay, yes, it's retraced slightly in the last hour or so since we started this video, but my point being is that that is incredibly low on a 2-week scale. It's still slightly high in my opinion on a 90-day, which is why I'm kind of anticipating whether it comes in or not. Certainly around that 100 mark, 87 might still come in over these coming weeks, who knows. But the 28-day I'm not angry with. So yeah, for me personally, I can't remember where my trigger points were on the higher ones. I know I've got one around 102. It hasn't come in yet. Just slightly off earlier today at 106, I think it got down to. 105 it got to. Well, there you go. So not quite the 102 or whatever I put in, but maybe it will get there overnight. Who knows? And my point being is that we're in this bearish momentum. We just need to pay attention to some of these areas. I'm just going to draw another one in here as well, just taking the most recent top points and the most recent low points as well, just to back down to here. You can start seeing a few macros. I know there's loads of lines here, but you can start to see it. We literally very came close to that 102, which is why I've got the marker there. But it looks like, as I said, it's trying to signify some clarity around this 112, 113 mark. Let's see what happens. But the performance indicators, isn't it amazing how fast or how things change in such a short space of time? Because it was only a few weeks ago we were boasting about all these projects all being in green on the performance indicators on the right hand side here. Albeit it's just clinging on to the 6 month and the year to date figures over here on the right hand side. But look at that, the month, the week, the 3 months, they're creeping up, guys, in a negative fashion. And it's not just quant, it's across the board. As I said, 2 weeks is a long time in crypto for all these changes and these imbalances of what's to come. So do expect some volatility around this area, kind of like a matching area that we saw at the latter stages of last year. But as I said, I think realistically, as a project and as market, for us to go into a proper bull cycle, honestly, hand on heart and based on experience, I think we should be trying to check off proper verifications of support levels and resistance. And to do that, it sounds far-fetched, but I do believe in my head still that 87 could still potentially come in. It's my opinion, not advice, obviously. And whether it comes down to this area, as I said, is a bit far-fetched, but we could at least bounce around these kind of areas, around the 75 to 80 mark, which we saw back here in May last year as well. Can you believe how fast this year is going? It's literally been a year since the balance of these charts. Absolutely crazy. But yeah, that is quant. If anyone has any further questions, drop them in the live chat. And if there's any projects or tokens you want us to cover, shout them out as soon as you can. I won't stay on too much longer, probably another 20 minutes, if that. But yeah, if there's any more to squeeze in, let me know. I'm going to cover a couple of other ones. I think someone was asking me about Casper. So Casper, I need to do an update video on that one as well. It's just like no time to do these things. But if you remember the last Casper video that we did, we drew in this area of interest. Now this was mainly picked out because of the fluctuating patterns that we saw back here in August 2022 and these lower regions in September and June last year respectively. And as this kind of patterned upwards with CSPR, we started to analyze, well, okay, we're hitting these trigger points, they're rejected here, it's rejected here, so we need to start thinking about, okay, they now need to try and find a support level, first of all at these kind of areas, but also the lower ones too. Going back to that point about verification of support, it doesn't happen immediately, guys. It could literally take 3 to 6 months sometimes. and it has to be done to be able to create the platform and strength upwards. Because the way people trade, I'm not just talking about retail investors here, I'm talking about just general traders and long-term, short-term. They all have these trigger points. They all have the buy orders in there already. Occasionally I do most of the manual ones on DCA opportunities, but I do have really big capital application to specific big areas and short areas in the charts. So that's just little old me, right? You can imagine the big investors doing this, and that's where you do get it. When you get to those fib levels, it's quite amazing to watch it. Actually, I do recommend it. Like, I know it sounds a bit weird, but I do recommend every now and then just to go into like the hour charts and stuff, or even like the minute ones, the 5-minute ones, because when you get to these like fib levels and you zoom in, you can really see humongous. I'm sure it's mostly automated market makers and bots like trying to pick it up, but also it's about the orders where people would put those trigger orders in to try and keep it afloat so they don't get their stop losses or drop down further. It's a little battle. It's quite amazing to watch, and you can see it's not like everyone's sitting there like pressing buttons like the old days. It's all mostly automated and botted these days, unless you're doing your manual ones yourselves. So this point being is that we're now going to start seeing the patterns bouncing off each of these levels. And look at this. Look, straight across the bat. It particularly on the way down is very interesting, because where you see the drop downs, the little wicks, and then they pull themselves back. They're always like wicks down towards these areas, and then they pull themselves back up. And this is where you get like the magnet effect of these particular areas it wants to try to get to. So it's obviously rejected these because there's hardly any support structure to go by. And particularly back here, if you look at October to November last year, it was all really longevity moves, right? So there's no clarity there to say, like, well, there was this big gap. And this massive gap always concerned me with CSPR between November and January this year, respectively. And you pay the price. Now you have two alternatives with this kind of aspect. One is to play the game of trading along the way up and down in that momentum, or like myself, I don't massively play the trading. I've got a couple of assets that I mess about with for fun, really, and learning, actually, to be fair. But for this one in particular, for me, it was like on the upward trend. Well, I've already like purchased down here, and yes, of course you can DCA because you never know what's going to happen. But when it started getting to these like bubbly effects, I was like, I'm just going to sit back a bit, analyze the data from afar, and that's when you see the huge gaps. So you could argue that's why we drew this kind of rectangle in for areas of opportunity. Well, that one's come in and that one's come in, and they're very much roughly around where we drew. There is an argument to say that we could potentially come down slightly lower to retest these particular areas, and that's probably where I've drawn this orange line. You can see across the board that could be a potential area of interest at the very low areas of 3 cents. But right now, I'm just very interested in the accumulation of this particular area on a DCA level, and let's see what happens over the next few days. Performance-wise, for CSPR, relatively better story than some of the other ones, but really positive on the year-to-date and the 6 months. But the lower regions of the weekly and the monthly are down relatively significantly. I wouldn't say like the end of the world, but it's giving you the ideology that we're obviously in a bit of a bearish mood, and therefore we need to really assess the risk as we do things like this. Will this live be saved? Yeah, I believe so, because I think it's recording, so I think it goes on live. If you do listen to it back, I think for the first 5 minutes there's a big echo, and that's because I stupidly didn't press the button. But there you go. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you for watching, by the way, guys, and putting these comments in. When meeting Quan, maybe ask about the thoughts on the alliance block and ID the partnerships. And is the partnership still good? Yeah, good question, Thomas. Yeah, of course. Ironically, we've been trying to do an AMA with Alliance Block for some time, as you might have known from the community post that I've been putting in, and obviously it went a bit quiet over the last month or so. And at first I was like, oh, this guy's darking me. What's going on? So really great team, by the way, really nice people. And I understood what was going on with the hacking and everything, and obviously it went a bit quiet, but he was like, just give us a bit of time. and that's obviously past the NXRA token is very much into fruition now of the exchange and people being able to swap them over. And I think, in my opinion, this is one of the best changeovers I've ever seen. Alliance Block were very, very lucrative in the way that they, gave that opportunity of letting people know in time, and then moving into that transitional period to the new token that they created through airdrops, etc. I think it's very smooth. I know it's really annoying for investors and holders, but these things happen. We're in we're still in an unregulated space. We're still in a space where there's a lack of control sometimes, but that's what you want to see from a project, in my opinion, is the staff and the team reacting in a very professional way, and getting it done as quickly as they can and keeping people updated. As I said, it's obviously very frustrating. It's frustrating for me, and I'm sure it was for many of you out there as well. But they got back in touch over the last few days over LinkedIn and stuff, which was really nice for them to come to me and say, like, we're in a bit of a good position now. They obviously want to have a few updates going out to the public and stuff, so we'll definitely get that Alliance Block AMA sorted out as soon as possible, which would be really cool. As I said, their team's really, really nice people, and I've got a lot of time for them. But yeah, absolutely, when I'm at the Digital Pound event, Thomas, I will for sure ask for you. Don't know what answers I'll get back, because I'm guessing that a lot of it's kind of confidential, but from my perspective right now is nothing's majorly changed. I think even Quant actually, in that period of time of the hacking, came out with some interesting articles and stuff that kind of like talked about this topic, about these kind of things still happen, and that's why it's even more important than ever for companies like Quant to start taking a heavier initiative on the forefront of that. So I will definitely ask the question, but I can probably think of the answer already. We'll see. So yeah, working back here, guys. Proppy. Let's have a look. I don't know if did I get Proppy on here. I think I've shown it before. There we go. Proppy. Proppy, by the way, guys. This is not one of the best visual charts, I don't think, because I think this is based on CoinEx, and it's only taken data back to January 2022, so we've only got a year and a bit. But saying that, it does tell quite a good story. I think that might have been when they launched the token. I'm not sure, to double check. But that gives you an indication, guys, as to actually the lower regions that we're at. It's actually a relatively supported project in terms of its price point. A lot of these tend to dip down to like cents and stuff like that. So Proppy, for those that don't know, this is heavily related to real estate. And this sector and this industry in general is really interesting to me. I've always been interested. I don't own properties other than like the house I'm living in right now, obviously. But property developers, landlords, estate agents, you really need to pay attention to this area of interest when it comes to blockchain and tokenization. Or even we could probably argue that they're called PNFTs. That's physical NFTs. NFTs aren't pieces of art always. Anything that's not a ratio 1-to-1 has a significant value based on supply, demand, and commodities and all these things, right? And houses are no different. But what was really interesting to me about Proppy, and yes, there are a couple of other projects that do this. Some even like HBAR and stuff are looking into commercial and real estate as well. But Proppy is one of the first ones that caught my eye. Again, I love teams in terms of like who's behind these projects. I can't remember some of their names. I think there's one Natalia there or something. We'll try and get an AMA with these guys as well. But the principle being is that these guys worked in the real estate industry for many decades. And when you've got that experience and that enthusiasm, that really helps. But then, with Proppy, they're taking the advantage of utilizing real estate on blockchain, the ability to integrate things like smart contracts. So you think like how long a house sale takes. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but here in the UK it could take months, 6 months, 9 months, sometimes even longer, depending on various things like the chain, like the person you're buying off, are they buying off something and they're waiting? It could be things like land registry checks, fraud and money laundering checks, all that sort of stuff, the administrative stuff. And it's really interesting because like the smart contract aspect of blockchain, where we're starting to integrate information, i.e. about the deeds of the house, you as a person, your history, your financial situation, your financial ingoings and outgoings, all being automated, all being processed and verified on blockchain immediately, speeds up the process significantly. And we start taking out the intermediaries. And when you take out the intermediaries, you take out the cost. And this is very interesting for the economy, but it's also very interesting for the real estate mechanism as well. So for me as a user, as a consumer, or a buyer of a house, you could argue like, well, okay, well, I don't need to pay my 5-6 grand to the estate agent anymore. I'll pay a small fee through blockchain. Everything's all done on algorithm and data. Like I might have had a conservatory added, for example, but all those materials that have been purchased for it are in the deed, the smart contract of the house, and it's automatically updated that actually the value of this house is based on the algorithm everywhere else, not by someone coming to my door and going, yeah, we think your house is worth this, mate. And then that's how we get this kind of like really weird fluctuating patterns in the market. So the property token is very interesting to me. It's something I've slowly accumulated. I would love to add more and certainly add it a bit quicker than I do. But I would say that it's definitely one that I'm sort of anticipating a really interesting future and development with when it comes to this sector. So as I said, unfortunately, the chart's not the greatest one to show because it's not perhaps the best pairing exchange I've got for TradeView. But the argument being that when someone asked actually before, these fluctuating patterns with these big uptakes, now this usually comes around when houses have been sold through the property system, and it's really interesting. Definitely get involved on their websites and stuff and their information panels of when they do these sales. Like there was one really cool one last year, I think it was in Miami. The first NFT house was sold, and it was covered in quite a few areas. I think it was a bit hoo-ha at the time actually, because an article went out claiming that some company had done this, but property were like, hang on a minute, we're the first ones, actually change that piece of the article please, and it was done within a few hours. But yeah, these big push-ups are usually because of the influx of tokens and the fee utilization, the tokenization of this to formulate a sale of a house. And if you think about commercial estate, real estate, and how much money could be saved in this development of real estate, it's really interesting. It is really interesting. So for me with property, as I said, there's not humongous differences in the price over the last couple of months, but do keep an eye on it, guys, because there could be some opportunities as the like bearish momentum of the market is in at the moment. Property is usually a very stabilized asset for some of the reasons I just mentioned. But do anticipate always with any of the charts and any of the moves of any asset class in crypto, this could change at any moment. But it has relatively stabilized around this sort of 35 to 45 cent mark. So all I've been doing personally is just waiting for the little drop down dips to accumulate some more, to be honest. But as I said, I don't put loads of money into this. I'm just very conservative and you know, obviously measure the risk with everything that I do. But yeah, property is one that I'm just trying to accumulate, as I think this industry and sector is, you know, it's worth trillions of dollars anyway, to be honest. But these guys can really accelerate because their team is phenomenal and they know what they're doing, which is what I stand by when I invest. I'm really interested in it. So yeah, thanks for shouting it out, Kingdom Sam. It's a really good project. Alistair, thanks for all the content you do. Learn loads over the past couple of months. Really appreciate it, Alistair. And you've mentioned Jasmine. I've got a Jasmine video, I think, going out this Saturday. It took a bit longer than I anticipated because I had to do it in 2 blocks, and then I was like, I can't edit this properly, so I had to redo the whole thing. So I should have it out on Saturday for you. And Jasmine is a very funny one because in our WhatsApp group and some of my really old friends, even from school, that are on there, they were literally like, can you do Jasmine? Can you do Jasmine? And they keep going on about Jasmine for a long, long time. And it's literally not because, you know, I don't believe it or anything like that. It's just because I've got so many assets and projects in my portfolio. I struggle to add more, but you'll be interested to know, I always find this, but when I do a lot of the research for these videos, I end up sometimes just going into the project because I'm like, oh, actually, this is really interesting. And that's a really good point for you guys out there, to be honest, to not just jump into projects just because like video channels, whether it's ours or others, just talk about it. Always do your own research. But this one was a really interesting project, and I'm very interested in its like partnerships with like Sony. And to be honest, partnerships with Sony are no surprise because they're all Japanese companies anyway. But the point being is that these guys could really dominate in their own region, and that region being Japan is a significant amount of market capacity to make that kind of big initiated move over the coming years, in my opinion. And certainly through the research, it definitely delves into that in a lot more detail. So I'm just going to draw a couple of things here just to make sure we've got some clear markers. Again, hopefully this chart's quite good actually. It's not too bad. Again, it only goes back to November. That might have been when the token launches. This dinosaur, I don't even know when I put it in there. It keeps coming up on all the charts. I must perhaps give him a name or something, or how, I don't know. Like, it just sits there. I don't know where it's come from. I'm just going to do a long-term chart fib retracement. I'm just going to put it all the way across and then fix it when we zoom in. This to give you a bit of an indication, guys, as to some longer level areas that we want to try and achieve. But that's a big gap. Wow. Okay, so that's 1.3 cents. So we're currently lowest of 0.002 and the current price point of 0.004. Okay, so as we zoom in a bit more, we can see a bit more detail on this one. And it's pretty much similar stories to a lot of the other asset projects out there at the moment. I'm just going to drag that across, just make it a bit more accurate. Okay, so the stepping stone approach, again, a similar pattern to many of the other assets we've covered in this video and across the board, in the sense of around about towards the latter stages of February, we've had this downward trend, and it has literally been making its way. You can see the sideways patterns sort of randomizing themselves around these areas. So there's obviously been a real interest area here, which levels off actually in history quite nicely. So that's around the 0.0062 mark, and also let's draw this one in here so you know what I'm talking about. And obviously we're now testing this area. Now if this breaks, guys, I do anticipate maybe 2 or 3 days worth of like some fluctuating patterns around here potentially. If that does break, there looks like there's an interesting area here at 0.0045. But in general, this gap and this gap is quite big. So my perception of this would be that we're pretty much looking at this area as a mid-term sort of positioning that we could get to. So I'm just looking at the RSIs here on the left-hand side. At the moment, 36 on the 14-day. If I just track that back a couple of days, see where we've gone pattern-wise. Yeah, it's been jumping up and down a bit, but yeah, it's coming down to really interesting areas. So that 28 days of interest to me. So I did get some Jasmine up here, so it's not too far off where it is, but let's put something else into perspective, guys, the price point of this. So 0.004 to 0.005, I'm not going to lose any sleep over this, but it's always interesting to get, especially when it's the first time you jumped into something, a bit of coordination as to, right, this is the position that I started off with and measure it from there. So there are some critical areas, not just because of these fib levels, but I'm also interested in the fact that this was interesting because this was a rejection, took it all the way up, and it was so steep, so quick, it's mirrored that effect, and we came on the way pattern down, right? So this area is of interest purely because of that volatility area, and what I just mentioned just a minute ago is this interesting area relating to the gaps. So yeah, I'm going to probably put some orders down here anyway after this video, put a reminder on my phone in a second. But yeah, this could be very interesting indeed to see if that comes in. But as I said, if you're a long-time holder of these kind of projects, I guess the game right now is just accumulating as much as I can, and that's what I will be trying to do. And it's a good opportunity to do that with these kind of lower prices, to accumulate bigger numbers. But more importantly with this as well, in this instance, is of course the differentiation of the price points is not massive. It's not huge. If you're a short-term trader or a day trader, of course it makes a bit more difference to you as an individual. But if you're a long-term holder, let's be realistic here. It's not too different. You know, we're talking about like, we're not even talking about half a cent here, guys. Like it's that crazy. So yeah, a very interesting one for Jasmine. But the other two areas of interest to me for various different reasons. But yeah, interesting to see if we get some sideways movement here. We could, based on this area and the fact that it rejected here, it rejected on the way up, we could see, as I said, some interesting patterns along this part, and it could stabilize, guys. It could stabilize and then jump itself back up, and then that's when we'll probably attack this area again. So we just have to keep an eye on that. It's so simple to say this, really, because there are literally only two options. Is the fact that it will solidify itself here and retest these higher areas, or it will literally come back down to potentially around these areas to test these module areas here. So that's really only two ways it can go. I'm not going to sit here like a scientist and pretend there's any other conclusions to that, to be honest. But yeah, Jasmine, as I said, thank you for mentioning that, Asda. But I should have that video out this weekend, Saturday, I think. So hopefully you will enjoy that. The dinosaur indicates the beginning. Yeah. Oh, is that what it is? Ah, I thought I put that in there by accident. I wonder why I couldn't move him. Oh, bless. Why a dinosaur? That's to do with like the beginning of time or something. Interesting. Learn something. See, we're all here learning. I'm learning. One last quick point on Jasmine before we move on to another one. The performance indicators on the right hand side here. So again, the weekly and the monthly are down quite significantly. The year to date is still very strong. So yeah, that's 6 months of interest to me as well. So as I said, we're in very low territory of Jasmine, especially after the kind of launches and everything. It's kind of done its business to come on its way down. So it's obviously stabilizing. I would also mention, when we look at a bull cycle, maybe in like a year, 2 years time, there's so many projects with massive utility like this that were around these prices and no one took notice, and people didn't really take notice until it got to like the 2 cent, the 3 cent mark, and all of a sudden it went bang. So again, in my head, I'm like, well, has it got utility? Brilliant, tick that box. Great team behind it, great partnerships. The ecosystem's fantastic. Can't wait to go through that with you on Saturday. But my point being is that there are some things that hide and don't, get much recognition or awareness around them, and then all of a sudden, bang, they're out of here. So. Quick reminder, guys, smash the like button and also subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you for joining us. We're going to try and do this weekly at least. As I said, it's really difficult for me to do individual videos sometimes with the workload I've got at the moment. I'll try my best, but either way, hopefully everyone's learning something. We try and keep it very unbiased and very informative as much as we can. One other one I'm going to pick out is H-bar Hedera. This is one that I love to accumulate when I see drops. I'm just going to pull across the long-term fib level. Just going to move it to typical. Just going to move that across there in line, and also this one across as well. And so let's have a look. H-bar Hedera. Hedera is absolutely phenomenal. I think they're going to be at the Digital Pound Foundation event. I can't wait to meet with these people. It's going to be amazing. So first and foremost, before we talk about the right now price point, I just want to reiterate a couple of data points of interest here to recognize like why we're getting to the stages where we are. So obviously this bear momentum is kicked in. There's some critical points that I want to mention. Obviously this big area of sideways trading going on here and throughout most of January and into February respectively. It was very much matching with previous data points back here. Now if we pull Hedera back out, we're seeing that we're at very low stages to where Hedera can be. Someone asked me the other day, where do I think H-bar could get to? In honesty, like the answer is never like concrete, but I do believe by 2025, particularly the integration of CBDCs and all the other technological advancements that Hedera have, especially with the utilization of the fantastic direct cyclic graph that they're working on, I could easily see this like between the $3 and the $5 mark. Honestly, like that's just based on so many different variables, but also what I know that they're going to be achieving in this short space of time. And again, this is a huge financial related institutional project with a phenomenal team, phenomenal partnership backing, a phenomenal consortium behind it, guys. Really big work going on with them. So that in mind is why I have those kind of figures in my head. I just made them up. But yeah, for sure, it's going to be interesting to see this ride. But as I said, these points of interest are very worth paying attention to. But what you can see here is that we've rejected these areas quite quickly. So we've rejected this area which matches up with this kind of area that we see. In fact, the last video I did, I drew this area in as a point of reference, that this is going to be the stable line. We had that stable line here and it's penetrated through, and now we're on our way down. So we've got these areas of interest to look at. One that we drew in a while back, and I've still, I believe, got my orders in at just below 5 cents, and I've got some lower ones, I think, for some reason, I can't remember why. But I definitely got one here around 5 cents. So it'd be really interesting to see if we come down a bit further to where we are now. But I'm probably need to check my my Qcoin account, because I think that's probably come in. By the way, guys, as well, Ledger, I think every week, Thursday and Friday at the moment, are doing feeless purchasing through the platforms like MoonPay and stuff. So usually a lot of the time as well, if I've got time, I jump onto my Ledger and I buy HBAR and a few other projects directly through Ledger. It's quite cool, especially when you're not paying any fees, which is really nice. So just mention that in case anyone's got a Ledger and they want to try using that service instead of exchanges. I'm going off exchanges massively, to be honest, for various reasons. But yeah, Hedera floating around this 5.5 cent mark. So as I said, if this breaks, I'd be very surprised if we didn't see some sideways movement around this area, which would match what we saw back here in October, September, October time last year, 2022. But saying that, with the momentum that's going on, we've got a few more announcements of the Federal Reserve and everything over the next week or two, which we mentioned at the beginning of this video, that could come into play here. So we just got to keep an eye on that. But if this does break and we don't get that support line, and I'm particularly looking at this area here in November, you see this 2-day complete drop, which was that from 5.8 cents all the way down to 4 cents. I'm not saying that it's going to mirror that, but you do have to pay attention to those kind of moves, because you see this big gap, and when we break this, it sometimes doesn't always stop at the next level. It goes to the next one even further down from that. So it's this area of interest to me, to be honest. The lower region of 5 cents, which I've got my buy order in, or waiting to have the buy order in, and even lower that, 4.5. So they're the areas that are really interesting to me on this wave down. But saying that, I am expecting for us to be messing around this area for a bit, and then if it does and it gets more confidence in there, and it could even take maybe 2 weeks, in 2 weeks time people get paid. So this is how the pattern sometimes works, that we could actually start testing these higher areas again. But it's really going to be over the next 48 hours, in my opinion, that decides, are we going to do this move, or are we going to come down to these potential lower areas to do that. And I have no issue with that. I like accumulating Hedera at these lower areas, but also the point being is that there's a long way to go, guys, and anything is possible. But of course, in my opinion, like I've said with the other projects, is that I want to see proper verification of support levels, and I don't think we've had that with HBAR, certainly if not for a long time. So if we pull this way back, you look at 2020, I think this is when I first started buying HBAR, in March, I think it was 2020. Around about these points here, it's hardly moved to the price of where it is now, which is the amazing thing I wanted to get across here, is that we're in these edged moments of history. Look at this pattern. We're bang in line with it. That's why I drew the orange line in there, and it's coming right into play. But if I put it back out again, just to reiterate, these low points of where Hedera went to after this and into a bull cycle, whenever that might be, it came up to these top levels of 57 cents, guys. Let's go. There's no reason why we can't be looking at bigger pictures here. Let me take that top level and that bottom level, by the way, because this will give you a good indication of the next big bull cycle. And I'm not saying it's in like a few months time or 6 months time. I'm anticipating it to be nearer 2025, to be honest, to see the full maximum of that. The big gap towards the next level is very much around that dollar mark. Actually, it'd be interesting to see if this could verify what I mentioned about $3 to $5. It's looking at a time kind of like top ends of $2.30. Wouldn't that be nice from this 5.5, 6 cent mark that we're at today? So I'd be happy as well, Alistair, with $1, let alone 3 to 5. But I honestly, if you look at the principles of what Hedera is doing and the financial institution level kind of projects, this is so early. It's not even been switched on yet. It's not even been switched on properly. And when we're talking about the replacement of the RTGS system and the whole entire financial infrastructure and the utilization of things like DAG protocols, who knows where it could go? Who knows where it could go? But yeah, I anticipate like by 2030, it should be way over the $10 mark. And that's when you kind of decide like your ambitions and your principles when you're investing or thinking about investing. Like, are you short-term, long-term? Are you doing a bit of both? And I am doing a bit of both, to be honest, but majority of my projects are here to stay in my wallets and everything to at least 2025. Assess it then, but for sure 2030, maybe retire early. That'd be nice. I just want a boat. Basically, I want a boat. I want to remove homelessness, which I think can be achieved with blockchain, and that's what I'm talking to a lot of organizations about at the moment. And I think we can do a lot more with like equality and quality of life in general. This is why I'm getting so focused on the right projects, but also making sure that I go to events like the Digital Pound Foundation to make sure that the points are put across, you know, because if this goes into the hands of the wrong people, we're just giving them more control than ever before. And that's game over, in my opinion. Like, CBDCs can go one way or another. So it's really important that, you know, we try and see what we can make externally so we can maybe get out of the mess, or at least try our best to improve the world. That's my goal anyway. Okay, guys, I'm going to try and wrap this up very soon. I'm just going to throw LCX in quickly because off the topic really of the beginning of this video was about all these banks disappearing and not being regulated and stuff. Of course, through the Liechtenstein protocol, LCX is one of the very few properly regulated crypto exchanges. It's very new. It's very much got a lot of room to grow. So a lot of people are like, why is it not moving? The exchange isn't very good. Bear in mind, it's the beginning stages. Binance and all these exchanges were like this at the beginning stages. I remember it very well. And LCX is no different. There's a massive opportunity with this project, I think. But from the buying perspective, we're going to keep this short and sweet. Looking back at the fib levels that we drew in the previous video, we had this orange golden line here. This was very much indicating previous data points to have an area of interest for me to put a buy order in. I've still got that buy order in at around 7 cents, but currently trading around that 8 cent mark, right? 8.5 is that? We went all the way up here, guys, to 15, and it was a really, really impressive move, to be honest, in a short space of time. January to the end of January, basically. But now, what's slightly different with this one compared to a lot of the other assets is not a drop steeply. It's taken its time to come down. So there's obviously a lot of confidence in this project, a lot of people accumulating at these specific areas, and that's what I like to see. The volumes are very high on LCX. You must take that into consideration as well. The fact that there's a lot of people, especially at financial institution levels, very interested in this. You know, they have great presence, the World Economic Forum. I think anything related to the World Economic Forum, as much as whether we like them or not, is very important to understand and recognise projects that are influenced by this topic and situation. But yeah, right now, this price point is trying to balance on this 8 cent mark. Similarly to the previous one that we just talked about, there's some areas of interest to really pay attention to is this area here on the fib level at 8 on the dot, but also where I put this golden line. And that reasoning behind that is because if you look closely at the data, you've got the big rejections here, you've got resistance on 2 big occasions here, and arguably here, albeit it did come up for some time. But this is where we pull across, and I'm going to draw in a square actually, like I've done with some of the other ones, because it makes it a bit more obvious how that looks. If I can now remember where the sodding rectangle is. There we go. So I'm looking particularly around this area to here. So again, these data points at the back here and following across to here, that gives us my top level of where I've got my purchase order. I know I've got those ones in. I need to check my account. I've got an LCX account. It's actually quite good. I really enjoy it. And these lower regions, purely because, well, first of all, we've got a few extra areas to get through to get to those lower positions. But the way the market's going, I do anticipate eventually to see this coming in. So we'll have to see if that actually happens. But I'm also interested in this, which is why we've got those top area purchases. You see the fluctuating pattern upwards. There's a little sideways movement and upwards again. So it was literally not even testing this area. And that's why I think this is of interest, because if we get to that area, I don't think there's enough solid data here to suggest that it's going to support. And therefore, that's why I'm potentially, in my opinion, anticipating us to hit these lower regions. That off topic, the RSI is showing 32 on the 14-day RSI. This is a really interesting DCA opportunity regardless, in my opinion, not financial advice, but what I would be doing and have been doing. But also the 20-day 44. The 50-day, 90-day is why I'm sort of thinking about waiting around here just in case it comes in, because that's still quite high. So I think from a longer term perspective, there's still potential movements to come down here just to really mirror what's going on in the rest of the market. However we look at that. The weekly and the monthly are down, still in negative format, but that year to date is so strong. It's one of the strongest out there, 173%. But that has slowly started diminishing, as has the 3-month one. So we'll see how long it sustains that for. But my point being, as I've just mentioned, is it's not been coming down very steeply at all. This is showing some great confidence behind it, and some really powerful investors are trying to not necessarily keep it afloat. I'm sure they are trying to some extent, but my point being is that like we've got some really seriousness around these kind of projects. So looking forward to seeing how that develops. EWT, and where do you think NXRA could get to? I think we just mentioned about Alliance Block. I think it's a massive project, right? And it's something that, again, it was a project that kept getting bombarded to me on community and in our WhatsApp groups and stuff. And again, it's not a project I had in my portfolio until I did the video on it, and I was like, okay, wow, this is pretty cool. In terms of its price point, it's really difficult to say, to be honest, because there's obviously like loads of different variables behind that. I would rather answer that question in a couple of months' time because of what's just happened. We first of all need to get that confidence and drive back into there, because when you've got like a project, and especially on an early stages, right, you need as much collateral as possible in this, especially in a bear market. It's very difficult for companies. So I worked in Web3 massively last year, and I can hand on heart suggest like there needs to be a detachment between a lot of these projects and the market itself, but some of them just can't avoid that at all. So when we look at the early stages of a company, or I'm going to call it a company, they're all companies, right? They're just crypto tokens. But yeah, these companies are at early stages, and when you've got things like hackings going on at that early stage, it's really not helpful. So this NXRA situation has obviously literally just relatively concluded over the last week or two with the transfer and the ability to airdrop and exchange the tokens, right? But what I'm going to see now is the reaction from that in a confidence level, because that's going to really dictate like the momentum of that token and the project moving forward. I think a lot of people have got their tokens back, and they're obviously like either going to sell them because they've had enough of it, or they don't trust it anymore. Or you've got people that are like, oh cool, yeah, it's all sorted now, fine, brilliant. And then it's the implementation of the mass adoption, not just the utility wise, which they're building heavily with developments and everything, but also the mass adoption of people's awareness towards this. So as ask me again about NXRA in a couple months, and the other reason I'm saying that is because of the data. I want to see data. I can't just give random kind of price points. In that instance, I've given one on like HBAR and other ones, because not just because of the institutional level information that I know personally, but also that there's data points as well to start seeing those kind of areas that we could get to. And I think it would be not necessarily inappropriate, but I think it'd be something that I'd want to have confidence in saying, not just willy-nilly throwing numbers out there. So hopefully you appreciate that. We don't like to shill things or talk about that kind of stuff. unless I kind of see some concrete relative information to suggest it. But yeah, it's an absolutely great question. In fact, I'm going to write it down in a second or now, XRA, and I'll put it in my calendar, and we will definitely do that. Really interesting. Health Goat, love the EWT content. I love Energy Web. In fact, we should look at that really quickly. I'll probably make that my last one. 11 o'clock here already, which is crazy. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Smash the subscribe button, smash the like button. As I said, we're going to try and do this weekly, on top of some of the other individual videos as well. EWT, for those who do not know what that is, Energy Web Foundation, EWT is the token. These guys are heavily involved in things like carbon credits and the utilization of blockchain within the energy sector. This comes in loads of different formations and formats, through EV cars, transportation. It comes through solar panels, the ability to have like Web3 hotspots and transfer excess energy carbon credits to other people around the world wherever they are, and also create transparency and verifications of market trends and market brokering. Whereas at the moment, of course, brokers tend to go to the national grids. They take the energy, they add commissions, this, that, and the other, all the other nonsense tax and stuff, and then we have to pay through the nose for this. And it's kind of like, well, that's crazy, because in our country here in the UK, for example, Eon I'm with boast 100% sustainability, i.e. my energy comes supposedly from the wind turbines and solar panels, but the bills are higher than ever before. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, we're using kind of free energy, appreciate there's a cost for transferring that energy and other bits and pieces, but actually if you look at the breakdown, a lot of it's all tax related, and because of like windfall taxes and other nonsense that whoever decides to add on there, right? So yeah, that aside, the idea behind blockchain is to have it fully transparent, and for you and I to exchange carbon credits if we wanted to on a fair system, one that's not going mental, and it's done on algorithm, not me going, oh, I've got excess energy, I'm going to sell it for loads on the market to you, which is unfair. And that's one of the main reasons why we're stuck in this crazy world right now. So EWT working heavily on so many cool things, and if you haven't seen any of our videos, go check them out, especially the intro one and stuff around like the Vodafone integration, SIM cards with EV cars and wireless contactless charging, all that cool stuff. It's all about the grid, guys. Smart grid, smart home, IoT, the integration of energy, smart meters. It's all coming together. This was the process, and blockchain was going to be behind this to infiltrate the whole thing together. So it's really interesting. Heavily involved the European Commission as well, with some great developments going on there. So the price point at EWT, this is actually really a good one to bring out. So thank you for mentioning this one, because actually it's one I always try and accumulate. I'm staking mine on the pool. I do have an EWT staking video coming out tomorrow or Sunday, relation to their green pool and staking EWT. It's really massively great initiative, and it's very long term as well, which is really cool to get some really good gains and rewards on that. But you can see a lot of people get put off because of the price point of EWT. We need to understand again the life cycle of EWT, how early we are still with this project, and what's to come. The energy sector is worth trillions of dollars, especially renewable energy sectors, and the ability with blockchain integration. These are one of the very, very few projects out there that cover this topic, but also probably one of the top ones that are already integrated around the world with top level institutions, governments. That kind of level is what you want, right? So in this instance where it was up at this sort of like $4 or $5, I was like, the usual thing came in my head. I wish I bought more when it was down here. Back in July last year, it was around $2, and I did pick up a fair amount of that, to be honest. But actually, if you pull it back, it's not majorly far off to where we are right now. But it's when you're talking about the differences of pounds rather than cents, it's always sometimes psychological. For me, it's about gains. And actually, if I pull this way back, we can see where AWT went previously, up to around $23. So there's still an interesting return to get to for those areas from this point to there. But moving forward with EWT, I'm hand on heart saying this as well. With the point about price predictions, again, with the institutional level, with the integration that's going to be coming over the next few years, the sector, I do a lot of research around the energy sector. I have done for a long time, maybe over 15 years. I did a dissertation around environmental impacts and stuff in marketing and things like this. It's always been a fascinating topic to me. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to go to the trade shows in Farnborough, where the air show, I don't know if it's still fully going at the moment. I know they closed it down a couple of years, but I saw the first like models of wind farms, and I was like, what on earth is this? This looks amazing. Like, being a nerdy kid, I don't know why I was so fascinated about wind turbines, but it was the first concept of like, this is the future. And we fast forward like 20 odd years ago that was, to where it is now, and it's quite staggering. But now the cost of it for manufacturing those kind of things come down. Locally to me in Portsmouth, we see the ships, the huge cargo ships, taking the turbine blades out to I think it's off the coast of like Chichester way, down south here. And you can see in the distance, massive. There's one in Liverpool as well, a huge one, and I'm sure they're everywhere. But my point being is that this market in general, from the manufacturing perspective and the integration of these, is phenomenal. More farmers, because of the agricultural bill in the last couple of years, diminishing farming utilisation and reducing meats and all the other nonsense they're throwing out in the news at the moment about eggs and stuff. It was all rubbish to try and reduce the farming rates, the emissions, etc. And farmers are running out of the money, so what do? They sell their land to solar farms, or they build the solar farms themselves, and this is how it will happen, and it will continue, right? So this is why I'm interested in EWT and Pro. So back to my point about the price, this in my head is like a $100-$200 price point in the coming years. I'm not saying like maybe 2025, but certainly between that 2025 and 2030 mark. 2030 is very important, guys. The Agenda 30 program, the World Economic Forum, UN's institution, the UN Agenda 30 program is very interesting to read. It's the Sustainable Diversification, massive, huge program. Download it off the UN website. Honestly, it's mental. But the point being is, you can also pinpoint projects that are heavily involved in the narratives of what the World Economic Forum and the UN push. And EWT is a phenomenal project, and it's also got heavy integrations with these kind of organizations. Put the two and two together, guys, like, then you see the adaptation of what's going to be involved. What they're even working on right now is phenomenal. So yeah, this 100 to sort of like maybe towards the 200 mark is not a random number in my head. It's based on data here on the charts, but also like the implementation of it as a technology moving forward. And when it becomes even more popular, I mean, look at Quant, for example, $150 a token. They're being bought out left, right, and center. And this is a project in its own sector, a humongous sector that no one's really talking about in this space, which I find staggering, is sat here at these lower price points when we're comparing them to where they will be. It's insignificant. So yeah, it's almost like you don't have to have a race to get like thousands of them. I mean, if you can, brilliant. I'm not in the 1,000 bracket or anything like that. I'm just accumulating them as and when I see opportunity, and I'm taking advantage of those rewards. Absolutely phenomenal. And if you're getting like 1 or 2 EWT tokens every few months, well, if it gets to $200 in the future, bloody brilliant. But at the moment, back to the price point of EWT, $3.45 at the moment. We saw these relatively recent highs of $5, so you can see that fluctuation, $2-3 is quite a lot, value-wise, right? We're not talking about cents anymore, we're talking about dollars. So short space of time, which is very interesting to see this drop so quickly, and that's an indication of where we are with the whole macro events around the world and the market in general. My point being is that we had this nice stable uprising, and it's dropped so quickly. I would probably say a quarter of the time in that short period of time. So December to end of February, we're talking about 2 months, in the space of not even a third of a month. You could argue, as I said, 25% or so being allocated to a drop down. So we've completely rejected these two, and if we look at these data entry points from previous ones, we've still got these buy orders. So my one must have come in. I have to check that. That's always nice to tick those off. I've also got this buy order down here at the lower $3 Will it come down to the area? I don't know just yet. We're at a critical point. That's the whole topic of this video in the first place, is critical support lines. It's literally across the board. Pretty much every chart is showing this, but we're messing about with this area of interest around here, and across this borderline here. I'm particularly interested in the lower regions of this area between September and October and November last year, which is very much roughly around where we are, and we've actually rejected that today and now dipped back down to these areas. So again, similarly to some of the other assets, we could see some sideways movement here, but this will really dictate if we can support that. In this steep momentum, it's got to be done quick and over maybe the next day or 48 hours, because it could potentially penetrate straight down, and that's when we might see these even lower areas here. Will it come back down to these previous ones at $2.50? I think it's going to take a significant event to bring us down to the area. I'm not ruling out, because anything can happen, and all the interest rate hikes, who knows, overnight, whatever, could potentially happen. But for me personally, I think this is probably a realistic area around this just low region of $3. So they're my two markers. I've always had them in there, and I'm sticking to my guns with those. For sure, it's great to see that one come in. I'm guessing that one came in as well. I've been so busy, I haven't looked at my account, but yeah, for sure, it must have come in. That one's come in. Who knows about this one? But I think, as I said, next 2 days will tell. If it can support there, interesting, because then it will just start to attack this one back here, and then we'll have another story to have in maybe a week or two's time as to this being a potential support area, because actually EWT has done very well in a short space of time to show some really interesting volatile areas in short spaces, and that's where the support tends to kick in. So very interesting indeed. So hopefully, let's just quickly before we jump off, 36 RSI 14, so yeah, good DCA opportunity. 28 day 44 is not too bad either. 90 days showing 48, so again, still top heavy for me to be like going too mad on this, but certainly there's some DCAs to look at there. The weekly's down 24%. It's just gripping onto the 1 month, but the rest of them aren't doing majorly well, and I think that's just understandable from the great month or two that it had. It has to come down at some point, but yeah, that's what we're seeing. So yeah, EWT will do a quant in price. I totally agree with that, Health Goat. I do believe quant will become significant over the coming years to some top level prices. I'm sort of talking about maybe 5 to 10 years in advance here, if they still allow us to hold crypto at that point, who knows. But yeah, for sure, I'm totally with you on that point about EWT, and it is an interesting comparison because it is one of those projects that is in those dollar marks and has a massive opportunity ahead of it. Nice one, Alistair. Yeah, Ferrum. Do you know what? Ferrum is so good for charity shops. With the exception of this jumper I'm wearing, majority of my stuff is from charity shops. I love it. I love finding all the designer stuff and all the hidden gems, and it's good because it pays to charity, right? So I'm all up for that. I've got some great shoes recently. I'm going off topic here, but yeah, Ferrum's quality, Robin's Nest, great antiques and LPs and stuff. So big up to Ferrum, and a great cafe there called the Garden Shed. Love it. I would try and go there at least once a month. Good guys there. So guys, I'm going to wrap that up there, I think. Thank you so much for joining us. I think there's a question here about, are we going to try and do this set times every week? That is probably going to be a good idea, actually, and I'll probably keep it to Thursdays at the moment. I might even try and do 2 a week. If you guys enjoyed it, absolutely brilliant. We'll continue it. But yeah, I'll keep doing individual videos, obviously, as well. But when there's big topics and there's sort of like similar momentums of charts and stuff, I will try and do videos like this 'cause it's so much easier than me doing like 10 different videos of the same thing. So hopefully, as I said, if you're rewatching this, thanks for joining us throughout this whole video. And sorry about the beginning about the echo, but yeah, it's good to be back on the live ones. And that's very much it, guys. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. Smash the like button, all that great stuff. And yeah, we'll catch up next week on a big live one as well. And look out for the Jasmine video this weekend. We've got a Casper update. We've got Alliance block with the NXRA token update as well. I think there's a couple of others. I think CPH actually might be. Oh no, that's next week. Yeah, there's loads going on in such a short space of time. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. We will hopefully see you in the next one. Take care and bye bye.